Hello boys and girls, let me introduce you to this monster, to this beast of an amp. This is the Fryette Deliverance II Plus guitar amplifier. 120 watt of sheer power, shaped very musically. That's how I would describe it. I usually don't do a lot of straight product videos on this channel, but this amp has blown my mind. And to make this even better, I'm not only playing the amp, I'm also playing the Fryette 4x12 fat bottom cabinet loaded with custom Fane speakers. So today you're gonna get the full Fryette picture. It's gonna be a lot of chuga fun. Here we go. The reason for doing a dedicated video about this amp is not because this is a great sounding amp, which it is. It's more because I feel it has a unique tone and that it is quite different from your typical or generic modern high gain tone. So it does not sound like a 5150, which you might like or not. So that makes it interesting, and that kind of inspired me to make this video. It's a very musical sounding amp, it's a very thick sounding amp, it's a very what I call vocal sounding amp, which might be the right thing for you or not, but let's find out, because what I want to do right now is I want to start from scratch and I want to dial in a few tones for you. I want to introduce you to the gain section, to the tone stack, to the power amp, and show you the tonal options that you have with the Deliverance. Let me give you a quick overview of the amp. It's not complex, to be honest. It's a 120 watt tube amp and it's seriously loud. Believe me, it's really loud. And we're gonna crank it quite a bit today. So we're probably gonna blow the roof off or something. It's seriously loud. There is also, I think, a 60 watt version that I have not tested. But this is fun because it has so much power and you can play with the power amp saturation. It's nice. I would call this a one-channel amp. There's only one EQ. However, you can switch between two different master volumes. You can also switch between different gain stages in the preamp. So yeah, you can switch between things, but you know, I would still call this a one-channel amp. I think it's intended for the guitarist who will also use his volume knob, you know, to adjust the gain. But we metal people, we don't do that. We just crank things, right? And then we dial in one great tone and that's all we need. Chuga. That's what we're gonna do today. I love the concept, so this is perfect for me. It's easy to dial in. It's a lot of fun. The knobs feel great. So yeah, let's get started. Let's talk about our signal path. So this is my high-pass guitar that you have seen a few times. I'm using this one in today's video because this is a 28-inch guitar and it can go really low. And this amp takes low tunings very well. So that's why I decided to use this one instead of my Fernandez today. Passive pickup also from high-pass, beautiful guitar, sounds great. We're going into a tube screamer, but just to tighten the lows a little bit before hitting the amp. And then we're hitting the Fryette 4x12 cab in my live room. And right now it's only mic'd with a single 57. I want to start with these settings here. They make no sense at all, but you got to start somewhere. So all the knobs are at noon, at 12 o'clock, except for the master volume. Then we've got two switches here. If you do metal, you really need the more. And I also have the bright switch. Because we need brightness, right? So as you can hear, it sounds too dull right now. I can already tell it feels really responsive. First of all, I need more highs, I need more presence. Overall, the Deliverance is a rather, I would call it round sounding amp, so don't be afraid of cranking the presence. Now let's talk about the gain section of the preamp, because it is quite unusual how you dial in your overdrive, your distortion. As you can see, there are two knobs here. One too much maybe, not really, because the idea behind this is that you can dial in the same amount of gain, the same amount of distortion in different ways with different combinations of those knobs. You can go from a rather modern and crisp and tight sounding distortion with less low end going into the distortion to something more old school, thicker, more woolly and more loose in the low end, and everything in between. Let me show you how this works. The second gain knob is easier to explain because this one is simply a clean gain. So the more you add, the more distortion you will get without coloring the sound too much. The first one is very different. You can see you can go from crisp to thick. And if you push this one, you are thickening your tone in two ways. You are adding more distortion, just like the second one here, but you are also pushing more low end into the distortion, if I understand it correctly. So you get a thicker sounding distortion. You change the type of distortion. Let's see how that sounds. Let me show you the two extremes here maybe. So let's start with something really thick. So if you push this one fully and then just dial in a little gain from a little clean gain. You will get a really thick, slightly loose distortion. But it sounds nice. This is a little more old school than your typical modern high gain distortion, obviously. If we turn off the tube screamer, you will hear it a bit more. Not the right distortion for super fast modern metal playing. More something for doomy. And if you go further with this one, it even gets a little fuzzy. You automatically start playing stoner riffs with a sound like this. Let's turn the tube screamer back on. Let me show you the other extreme. So let's fully crank the clean gain and just bring in enough distortion with the first one. And you see this is much tighter. Very different feel as well. And I found out that if you push a little more clean gain into the amp, and I'm going to do that by cranking the level of the tube screamer, not the drive, the level, boom, you can bring this one down even further and get even tighter tones. And if we now go back to the very first setting we had, let me show you this, and crank this one again. You will understand how versatile this gain section is. It takes a while to understand it, but it's really smart and it gives you a lot of options. So you can get a tight modern metal tone, but you can also let more low end like creep into the distortion, which makes it sound a little more old school. And yeah, it's great for solo playing or for stoner rock or for anything really vibey. It's just, yeah, you have both options, and it's cool because it can be changed without actually changing the overall tone. Very smart. So my go-to setting for modern metal would be fully cranked, clean gain, and then something around noon maybe. Let's talk about the EQ section of the amp. Once again, it is quite special. I want to start with the power amp. Let's talk about the depth control. This will add serious amounts of low end. More than you will ever need. Big balls, yes. I usually keep it at noon, but you can go really crazy. It's really, really effective and nice. Now, let's talk about the presence. The frequency of the presence control seems to be a bit lower than on your typical modern high gain amp. And even if you fully crank the presence, the amp always stays a little rounder in the top end. I wouldn't say dark, but a little rounder and less brittle than other amps, which you might like. Others might say, hey, it's not brutal enough. It really depends, but that is a part of the character of the amp, that it's a little, has a rounded top end, that even if you fully crank the presence, it doesn't have that, that extreme rattle that other amps have up there. So even something like this is not crazy bright. So you gotta have the presence quite high, maybe something like this. But it always maintains that rather round sounding, smooth sounding character. Now let's talk about the EQ section in the preamp. Let's start with the bass control. I gotta say, this bass knob does exactly what I expect a bass knob to do, unlike on many other amps. Listen, it's just like on your hi-fi system, a very smooth but effective broadband low-end control. I don't need more here, but I love how smooth this one is. Yeah, and together with depth control, you can go really crazy. But it always stays kind of musical on these two knobs. So really, really cool. Really impressive low end. And remember, we're playing, this is like almost 1 octave lower than standard tuning. Now, let's talk about the other two, middle and treble. And these are way more extreme. First, I was like, wow, are these really passive EQ controls? But they are. Just listen to this. Very effective. That one is also very musical, but they're extreme, so you gotta be a little careful, especially with the treble knob. My go-to setting is usually bass in the middle, and then I open up the treble until I feel like I have enough clarity. Something like this. And then to sound a little more metal, I might scoop the mids just a little bit. And that's a great modern metal tone, isn't it? Sounds nice and tight and articulate and precise. But you know what? This amp has a very special character that I want to show you now, because no matter how you dial it in, that amp will always maintain that character. It will always sound very round and very full and what I call vocal. Compared to other high gain amps, it has a kind of a very thick lower mid-range. It's not scooped at all. So it always sounds a little compared to other amps, which makes it a little less brutal, but so full and warm and vocal sounding. So let's just quickly compare it to my Brunetti Extra Lead, which is a a great amp, but just a lot more, yeah, standard sounding, standard voicing, and you will hear what I mean. So I'm going to switch from the Fryette to the Brunetti. Much cleaner, colder, a scooped lower mid-range, more rattle in the highs. Some might say more brutal. Fryette. Wah wah wah, much fuller. Super thick low end, nice lower mids. The distortion of the Fryette also feels a little less compressed compared to now. This is a total matter of taste. It might actually be easier to integrate the Brunetti tone into a mix because the lower mid-range is more scooped and the Brunetti like fills up the entire frequency space, so to say. Yeah, but it depends on what you want and what you like. The Fryette is just a very full and dominant kind of tone. People often talk about creamy mid-range when they talk about Soldanos. This is creamy, yet aggressive. And in the beginning I said this is like sheer power but shaped very musically, and now you maybe understand what I mean. Let's go back to the Brunetti one more time. So that is the character of the Fryette. It might not be the perfect thing if you're looking for the most brutal sounding amp and for the most extreme high end, and maybe it might occupy a little too much space in a very dense mix, but it is a fantastic tone. I gotta say that. It's a fantastic tone. Now let me show you another high gain tone that I kind of discovered and that I really enjoyed. The gain setting is exactly the same. It's just, I'm just going to change the EQ for this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fully crank the preamp EQ like this and bring back the presence a little bit. And also the highs. And what we get is a way more saturated mid-forward tone. That sounds a little more brutal. And that might be a little easier to be like integrated into a full mix. I really enjoy those saturated mids, and the reason I believe is that we are pushing more energy into the power amp now, and the power amp is already saturating a little bit. And you get that typical mid-forward sounding power amp saturation. But in a good way. Now you may have noticed that the low end is a little thinner now. The deep lows are gone, which is also something that typically happens when you push the power amp. But you know what? We can bring it back. Ooh. So these are two completely different tones, and I haven't even touched the gain structure in the preamp. I've just changed the EQ and pushed more energy into the power amp, and that just, you know, changes everything a little bit. And we get a way more mid-forward sounding, a little more compressed and saturated high gain tone. But let's move on with the power amp and let's push it a little more. That will be fun. So let's go back with all the knobs to where we started, something like this maybe, right? What's interesting about this amp is that the power amp saturation starts very early, already around 9 o'clock, but very smoothly. So you don't have to crank the amp all the way up to get, to get the power amp singing. It starts really early. And now, but at 9 o'clock, it's already really, really loud. So don't worry, this amp is loud enough, even if you want to have like a really tight and clean power amp sound. Now, let's just go a little higher. Maybe I will compensate the volume later so you can hear the difference a little better. I don't know. But if you don't know what power amp saturation is, let me explain it like this. If you go too far, you'll get some kind of telephone sound. It really pushes the mids, it rolls off the highs, it distorts the low end as well, makes it thinner. And so if you go too far, it sounds very honky and mid-rangey. But on the way there, it can sound beautiful. You get that mid-bark that a lot of, especially old school players, love. Not so much the modern players, but let's see. Mid-range. And that's a nice setting. Very nice overtones. It's more mid-rangey, which is cool as well, but the low end is not crapping out yet. With power amp saturation, I always start playing a little slower and a little more sustainy. It's not what you need for super fast stuff, but it just adds another color to the tone. Let's just go to 12 o'clock, see what happens. Wah, wah. Now we get the speakers moving. But you can see how this gets more and more mid-rangey. Still acceptable for some people, too much for me. The low end gets fuzzy and more thin, and the mid-range barks like a motherfucker. Let's go back to our tight setting at 9 o'clock. And the low end is back. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of power amp saturation, but you can easily play with it here on this amp. It's just getting very, very loud. So you need a good soundproof live room, or you need some kind of power soak or some kind of, like load box or something that can handle this and can turn that into heat. A few words about the cabinet. Here's a story. When I talked to Steven Fryette about doing this video, I told him, hey, I'm probably not going to use your cabinet because I'm a big fan of Mesa cabs and of DV77s and old vintage 30s, and that's what people are used to on this channel, and that's what they expect, and so I'm probably going to use that. Until I tried his cab. I mean, he told me you can do whatever you want, it's your video, but he said, like, I created this as a package, it's the whole picture, the cab and the amp. And when I tried it, I kind of understood because it sounds great together. But no matter which amp you use, it's a great cab and it's easy to mic. So I just put a 57 on the cab, moved it twice, and it sounded great. So also a clear recommendation. If you want to see another video just about that cabinet, let me know, okay? But right now I feel like if you want to get a Fryette cab, I would rather go, especially in the studio, I would rather go for a fan loaded Fryette cabinet and not for the EMINENCE, what was it, P50 loaded cab. That's also a good speaker, but it's way more difficult to mic it. This one is very easy to mic and sounds great and looks great, blah, blah, blah. Good cabinet. This video was about the amp. If you want to see more and hear more from that cabinet, you let me know in the comments. Let me sum it up. This is a very inspiring amp, and that was the reason for me to do this video. I spent a lot of time with this amp, more time than I need for doing a video or something, because I enjoyed playing the amp. It's really responsive. You can dial in a lot of great tones, but it also always maintains a certain character, unlike any other amp that I know. That made it special, that inspired me to play the amp, and so I knew, like, I want to show you this one. I know it's a lot of money for an amp. Do we still need amps like this? I do. Maybe you don't. I do. And if you play this amp in a room and go beyond 9 o'clock on the master level, it's also a lot of fun. No, but I'm probably going to keep this one. I'm not sure yet. I have so many amps. But if you're looking for something special, for something unique, and especially if you're looking for a thick tone, for a really thick tone, this might be your amp. So check out the Fryette Deliverance II. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you've watched until now, you've probably enjoyed it. There's another link. First of all, there are links to all the gear that I used today, as usual. There's another link to the interview that I did with Steven Fryette, which I think is 1 hour of guitar amp nerd talk between him and me. That was a great video. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. If you want to see a video about the cab, let me know. If you want to see anything, just leave a comment, okay? Say hello to me and to Stevie. All right. Great amp. That was fun. Thanks for sending me the amp. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.